because peace in the Israel-Palestine conflict had already been difficult to achieve way before Hamas's barbarous attacks on October 7th, and before Israel's military response. Now it seems in many people's eyes like impossible, but its essence is clearer than ever. Ultimately, a negotiation to establish a safe Israel beside a safe Palestinian state. Whatever the enormous complexities and challenges of bringing about this future, one truth should be obvious among decent people. Killing 1,400 people and kidnapping more than 200, including scores of civilians, was deeply wrong. The Hamas attack resembled a medieval Mongol raid for slaughter and human trophies, except it was recorded in real time and published to social media. Yet, since October 7th, Western academics, students, artists, activists have denied, excused, or even celebrated the murders by a terrorist sect that proclaims anti-Jewish genocidal program. Some of this is happening out in the open, some behind the mask of humanitarianism and justice, some in code, most famously from the river to the sea, a chilling phrase that implicitly endorses the killing or deportation of 9 million Israelis. It seems odd that one has to say killing civilians, old people, and even babies is always wrong. But today, I guess, we must. How educated people justify such callousness and embrace such inhumanity? All sorts of things are at play here, but much of the justification for killing civilians is based on a fashionable ideology, decolonization, which, taken at face value, rules out the negotiation of two states, the only real solution to this century of conflict, and it is as dangerous as it is false. The decolonization narrative has dehumanized Israelis to the extent that otherwise rational people excuse, deny, or support barbarity. It holds that Israel is an imperial colonist force, that Israelis are settler colonialists, and that Palestinians have the right to eliminate their oppressors. On October 7th, we all learned what that meant. It casts Israelis as white or white adjacent and Palestinians as people of color. This ideology, powerful in the academy but long overdue for serious challenge, is a toxic, historically nonsensical mix of Marxist theory, Soviet propaganda, and traditional anti-Semitism from the Middle Ages and the 19th century. But its current engine is the new identity analysis, which sees history through the concept of race that derives from American experience. The argument is that it's almost impossible for the oppressed to be themselves racist, just as it is impossible for an oppressor to be the subject of racism. Jews, therefore, cannot suffer racism because they are regarded as white and privileged. Although they cannot be victims, they can and do exploit others, less privileged people in the West, through the sins of exploitive capitalism, and in the Middle East through colonialism. Contrary to decolonizing narrative, Gaza is not technically occupied by Israel. Not in the usual sense of soldiers on the ground. Israel evacuated the Strip in 2005, removing its settlements. In 2007, Hamas seized power, killing its Fatah rivals in a short civil war. Hamas set up one-party state that crushes Palestinian opposition within its territory, bans same-sex relationships, oppresses women, and openly espouses the killing of all Jews. At the heart of the decolonization ideology is the categorization of all Israelis, historic and present, as colonialists. This is simply wrong. Most Israelis are descended from people who migrated to the Holy Land from 1881 to 1949. They were not completely new to the region. The Jewish people ruled Judean kingdoms and prayed in the Jerusalem temple for 1,000 years. They were ever present there in smaller numbers for the next 2,000 years. In other words, Jews are indigenous in the Holy Land. And if one believes in the return of the exiled people to their homeland, then the return of Jews is exactly that. Even those who deny this history or regard it as irrelevant to the modern times must acknowledge that Israel is now home and only home of 9 million Israelis who have lived there for 4, 5, 6 generations. Even more preposterous than the colonizer label is the whiteness trope that is the key to the decolonization ideology. Again, simply wrong. Israel has a large community of Ethiopian Jews, and about half of all Israelis, that is about 5 million people, are Mizrahi, the descendants of Jews from Arab and Persian lands, people of the Middle East. They are neither settlers nor colonialists nor white Europeans at all, but inhabitants of Baghdad and Cairo and Beirut for many centuries, even millennia, who were driven out after 1948. Now, Israel has done many harsh and bad things. Netanyahu's government is probably the worst ever in Israeli history and promotes a maximalist totalitarianism and is both unacceptable and unwise. Everyone has the right to protest against Israelis' policies and actions, but not to promote terrorist acts, the killing of civilians, and the spreading of menacing anti-Semitism. Their own Israeli people were protesting the Israeli government, but you cannot justify at all. You cannot justify at all the actions of Hamas. You cannot do that. You have to separate the two. You have to condemn those actions. You have to defeat Hamas. You have to free those people. And that's what has to happen. But the Palestinian people have legitimate grievances and have endured much brutal injustice. That is true. And so the war continues to unfold tragically. As I read this, as I talk about this, the pounding of Gaza is killing civilians, Palestinian civilian children every single day. And that is unbearable as Israel still grieves its losses and buries its children and defends itself. And we deplore the killing of Israeli citizens just as we deplore the killing of Palestinian civilians. We reject Hamas, evil and unfit to govern. We do not mistake Hamas for the Palestinian people whose losses we mourn as we mourn the death of all innocents. Right? That those things are all true. In the wider span of history, sometimes terrible events can shake fortified positions. Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin make peace after the Yom Kippur War. Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat made peace after the Intifada. The diabolical crimes of October 7th will never be forgotten. Never be forgotten. But perhaps in years to come, after the scattering of Hamas and Netanyahuism is just a catastrophic memory, Israelis and Palestinians will draw the borders of their states, tempered by 75 years of killing and stunned by one weekend's Hamas butchery, into mutual recognition. That is the only way. There is no other way. And that was from a really incredible article in The Atlantic by Simon Sebag Montefiore.